So one of the things that I want to ask you is, in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, you had the Royal Society of Arts, Commerce, and manufactures, as it was called, uh, uh, being the hub of inventions and encouraging invention, right? Uh, do you see similar organizations in countries like the US, India, Japan, where they encourage this kind of thinking because it happened as a melting pot in a organization like the Royal Society of Arts. So, do you see similar outfits in these countries?
It's a great question. So, to explain to your listeners, the Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce, nice snappy title, founded in 1754, is unusual because it's a subscription-funded kind of one member, one vote kind of organization where they pool the subscription funds, the membership fees, into a pot, and then using that pot, they then pay for things to do projects. In the first 100 years, that involves paying prizes for new inventions if they're not patented already, again, so that they kind of cover the stuff that isn't already being covered by the patent system. So wherever the patent system isn't very good at encouraging invention, they are hopefully filling in the gaps. So I see patents and prizes as being kind of complementary, right, rather than competing here. So that's what they were doing. And then they kind of shift on to other different ways of encouraging invention, like using exhibitions, and then later on, all sorts of other ways too. But that's the kind of organization it is. And I think it's still very unusual. It's a voluntary organization. It's deploying capital. It's very democratic because it's one person, one vote for that first 100 years. Before later they have a committee, which is representative. Today it's more like structured just like a normal charity with only a few differences. It's a very unusual organization. Even the RSA today, it gets the Royal much later in 1908, but even the RSA today doesn't look anything like the original RSA in terms of the way it's structured. And the closest thing I can think to it are you do occasionally in kind of crypto circles, you see DAOs, these distributed autonomous organizations. That's the closest thing I've seen, where DAOs are maybe used for funding new science or funding invention. That's the closest thing I've seen to it in terms of the way that it's structured.
What do you think of VCs or crowdfunding? Is it very similar, but you may not be doing it within the scope of, say, a organization like RSA?
Yeah, so crowdfunding is not far off. You did have crowdfunding in the 18th century as well, though. So most books were crowdfunded. Not most books, but lots of books were crowdfunded. If you look at a lot of books from the 18th century, there will be a list of subscribers, right? If you go to the back pages or front pages, there'll be a huge list of subscribers. These are the people who paid to get the book published. Because it's a very costly endeavor, very capital-intensive thing to do. So you had crowdfunding, but crowdfunding I think of as being more per specific project. Venture capital, I suppose, is different because it's for profit, right? You're doing something where you're expecting to get a return. Whereas one of the key things about the Society of Arts was that it was a charitable organization. So there's nothing expected from the members in terms of them receiving returns. There are earlier attempts in the 1720s to structure the same project as a profit-making institution, though. So it is kind of an evolution from this idea of the business corporation. In a way, the modern business corporation, is itself very similar to the way VC is today structured, right? Because the very earliest business corporations were for very, very high-risk ventures where they would maybe have a patent monopoly on the new discovery based on whatever they would get. But the very early ones are for things like voyages of exploration into completely new trading areas where no one's ever been from your country before. So in search of a northeast passage to Japan and China, but instead they find Russia. In search of a northwest passage, again, to Japan and China, because everyone wants to trade with Japan and China, but they instead discover Canada. They're trying it that way. Or later on, the East India Company in 1600 or 1599/1600. Again, trying to find a trade route, copy the Portuguese, see if they can work out how the
Yeah.
Portuguese have gone around the Cape of Good Hope, access to new markets. Obviously, later the East India Company becomes more like a state, but that's a much, much later development, right? For the early years, it's much more like it's a company. But also at the same time for things like mining, because you sink a mine. Let's say you put loads and loads of money, paying lots and lots of people to dig a hole down in the ground, and you find nothing, right? It's like VC, right? You spend lots and lots of capital. You organize all these investors. All the same with the Voyages of Discovery. You send out a ship. You hope that in a few years' time it comes back. Who knows? Maybe it comes back full of spices because you found India. Maybe it comes back with polar bears or something because you found nothing. It's like
Yeah, true. No, I think that's the reason why I was asking, are there, the forms that it has taken, is different.